The Fire Vellumental is a boss that's different from every other boss in Paper Mario the Origami King, because the Fire Vellumental's HP is based on how many feathers are left on its body. Every time that you successfully attack and damage the Fire Vellumental, some of its feathers will fall out and land on random tiles on the field. If you happen to walk by these feathers during your turn, then you'll take some damage based on how many feathers are on the tile. The normal way to defeat this boss is knock out a bunch of its feathers, then use the Water Vellumental's special attack to put out the fire, and then use the 1000-fold arm technique once the fire has been put out, and then you can pluck out the feathers on the Fire Vellumental, defeating the boss. But, big but, you may have noticed something during this fight. After every turn, after the Fire Vellumental attacks, it uses the Molten Feathers attack, where it sheds some of its feathers, launching them onto the field, damaging itself. This makes choosing a path where you won't take damage difficult, but it also damages the boss because it loses its feathers. So every turn, whether you attack the boss or not, the Fire Vellumental boss ends up taking damage. This got me thinking, let's investigate and see what happens if you don't attack the Fire Vellumental. Maybe we can come up with some unconventional strategy to defeat this boss. First, let's see what happens if we don't attack the boss at all. Every single turn, all that we'll do is place an empty tile in front of us. And it's really easy to survive the boss fight this way because you'll only be taking damage from the Fire Vellumental's attacks, and you won't be walking on any of the fire feathers and you won't be taking damage that way. And once our HP gets low, all that we could do is bring up the hearts that spawn right onto Mario so that Mario will heal and he won't take any damage by walking on any of the tiles with fire feathers. It's also convenient that it seems to be the case that you never have a tile with both hearts and fire feathers, so you can completely avoid all damage from the fire feathers in this fight. Turn by turn, the Fire Vellumental starts to weaken itself, running out of HP as it sheds all of its feathers onto the field. Everything is going exactly as planned. That is, until we meet our first problem. At a certain point, once the Fire Vellumental's HP is low enough, it'll stop using its Molten Feathers attack. It'll attack normally, but after that, it won't use Molten Feathers and it won't continue to shed its feathers. It looks like the Fire Vellumental doesn't want to shed the last of its feathers, defeating itself. Even if you do nothing repeatedly, turn after turn after turn, the Fire Vellumental just won't shed the last of its feathers, so we have to find something else to do. Normally, what you're supposed to do at this point is use the Water Vellumental on the Fire Vellumental to put out the flames, and then use the 1000-fold arm technique to finish off the boss. Let's see if there's something else that we can do. Is there another way to get rid of those last few feathers, because we're so close? Right now, we still can't use the 1000-fold arm technique because the boss is on fire, so if we try to get it, we just get hurt. What if we try jumping on the boss? Will we be able to knock out its last few feathers? Well, our first jump will do 2 damage, and then all the following jumps will do 0 damage. And you might have noticed, if you look closely here, that after the first 2 jumps, where the last 2 feathers are knocked out, Mario switches to jumping on the boss's head instead of the boss's body. I'm guessing that this is because the last of the boss's HP is now the few feathers that are left on the boss's head. So Mario switches from attacking the body of the boss, where all the feathers were, to attacking the head, where the few feathers are left. But this must have a higher defense because Mario's jump attack isn't able to damage it, and it seems like you have to use the 1000-fold arm technique to pluck out these final few feathers to defeat it. And after this jump attack, the boss will start glowing, being ready for its special attack, and in the next turn, it'll bring back all of its feathers and fully heal all of its HP. So is there anything else that we can do? So let's try going through the fight again, and let's do something differently. Let's do nothing every single turn up until the boss stops shedding its own feathers. And now, let's try using an ice flower. What happens when we use an ice flower? It misses. Moltres flew up high, so our attack missed. Not surprisingly, a fire flower also misses, so that's out of the question. But what about a POW block? Look, if we use the POW block, we're able to get an excellent action command. But it does nothing, so it's kind of funny that with the POW block, we can still get the action command, but with the Fire Flower, it doesn't let you get the action commands, but both attacks miss. It's starting to look like we need to use the Water Vellumental to defeat this boss, but I'm still curious, is there a way to get out those last few feathers without plucking them out with the 1000-fold arm technique? We know that Jumping doesn't work. Jumping can't knock out the last few feathers. Using items can't reach the Fire Vellumental when it's flying. So what if we use the Water Vellumental to try and knock out the last few feathers? Or use the Water Vellumental and then try some other attack. Maybe it'll have enough damage to be able to get through the defense of the Fire Vellumental and knock out those feathers. So let's try a Shiny Hammer. That doesn't do it. How about jumping after the fire's put out? That also doesn't do it. What if we use a POW block while the boss is on the ground? This way it should be able to reach it. Maybe it could even stun the boss or something like that. But nothing happens. And the same thing if we use an Ice Fire Flower. Nothing happens. What if we keep using the Water Vellumental attack, but we don't use the 1,000-fold arm technique? Will we be able to knock out the last of the feathers this way? Unfortunately, that also doesn't work. All that happens is the fight ends up taking longer because the Fire Vellumental isn't shedding its feathers every turn. It sheds its feathers every other turn this way. We just can't seem to get rid of those last few feathers without using the 1,000-fold arm technique. Is there any way to defeat this boss without attacking it? Which kind of sounds like a strange goal now that I think about it. It seems like we have to attack this boss with both the Water Vellumental and the 1,000-fold arm technique in order to defeat it. So, is this the end? Or is there any hope that we can have to get closer? We might not be there yet, but there's still some hope. Let's try something similar to what we did in the beginning. No attacking the Fire Vellumental. Every turn it sheds more and more feathers, and eventually we get to the point where the Fire Vellumental stops shedding its own feathers. Now let's jump on the Fire Vellumental, knocking out the last few feathers from its body, but it still has some feathers left on its head. So we've been here before, and we know what's going to happen if we do nothing. Let's just keep doing nothing. Let's see what happens. The Fire Vellumental completely heals itself, but that's okay, we can still survive. We can keep stepping on empty tiles, we can keep stepping on hearts when we need them, and we're doing nothing for this fight other than that attack. The Fire Vellumental keeps shedding its feathers, and again, we get to this same point that we were before, where the Fire Vellumental has those last two feathers on its body that it doesn't want to shed, and some feathers left on its head still. So again, let's jump on the Fire Vellumental, knock out the last two from its body. Oh, and the boss is glowing again, so it looks like it's going to heal to full health again. Okay, so let's sit here. But wait, when the boss heals, this time it didn't heal to full health. What's going on? The first time that the boss healed, it healed to full health. But now, if we do this, it doesn't heal all of its health. And this seems to be a common theme in this game, whether you're fighting a boss, or you're trying to get through the Trial of Courage, or some other part of this game. If you're not good at it, and you fail many times, then the game starts to get easier. And it seems like that's what's happening with the Fire Vellumental here, because it's not healing to full health now. So let's keep going, let's see what happens here. After doing this the third time, the boss heals again, and if we compare these HPs, it seems like every time the boss's HP that it heals is slightly lower. Maybe the boss heals less HP every time, or maybe the boss always heals from the feathers on one half of the board, and this time there just happened to be less feathers on this half of the board. Even if the boss heals less HP every time, and we were able to get it down to the point where it heals 0 HP when it recovers its feathers, I still think that we will need to use the 1,000-fold arm technique in order to pluck out those last few feathers, because it seems like that's necessary to damage the feathers that are on the Fire Vellumental's head. It seems like there's no other way right now to damage it. This isn't a very fast method at all, but if someone's struggling with this boss, then the first strategy that we used could actually help them out. If someone's walking over a bunch of fire feathers and taking too much damage, and that's what's making their HP run out, then you could just suggest for the first few turns that they do nothing and just bring up hearts right until Mario. The Fire Vellumental will shed most of its feathers, it'll have almost no HP, and then it'll just take you 2 turns to finish off the boss with a Water Vellumental and a 1,000-fold arm technique. Maybe one day we'll discover something new. Maybe there will be a way to defeat this boss and get past those feathers on its head without attacking it. Fact or myth? You can defeat the Fire Vellumental without attacking it. Right now, it seems like that's a myth. It seems like we need the water Vellumental to put out the flames so that we could use the 1,000-fold arm technique to grab the last few feathers on the Fire Vellumental's head and pluck them out, because that seems to be the only way to take out those last few feathers. If you enjoyed Paper Mario the Origami King, or if you're a fan of other Paper Mario games, you could subscribe to my channel to be notified when new videos come out. You could check out the rest of my videos, and if you'd like to come chat sometime, then you could join my Discord server or come chat during my Twitch live streams. I hope you have a lovely day. Thank you for checking out this video, and take care.